In the previous video, I mentioned using writing, using words to make a representation in the reader's mind. Something they can feel, see, touch. We mentioned using nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs that can be felt, or smelled, or seen, or touched. And I also mentioned at the end a gestalt. A gestalt is something the reader understands without you ever saying it. It's an understanding that is greater than just the parts. And as an example, let's look at Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. He writes of the old fisherman, "He settled comfortably against the wood and took his suffering as it came, and the fish swam steadily and the boat moved slowly through the dark water. There was a small sea rising, with the wind coming up from the east, and at noon the old man's left hand was uncramped." It seems actually that Hemingway uses a lot of adverbs and adjectives, but he does so for a reason. When he says the fish swam steadily, that should mean something to you if you've ever caught a fish. Fish don't swim steadily when they're hooked. They jump. They swim crazily, just like you jump when you're hurt. But this fish swam steadily, and the boat moved slowly. It should tell you how big and how tough this fish is, that it's swimming steadily, and the boat is not even jerking. The boat is moving slowly. This big fish is pulling the old man out into the dark water. And this water is so dark and so deep that a small sea rises. An ocean inside the ocean moves underneath the old man. He is all alone. He is suffering, being pulled into the deep by this great fish, and yet he settled comfortably. A man who can be that alone and that much pain and still find a way to make himself as comfortable as possible must be a very tough human being, which is what we come to understand through reading the book The Old Man and the Sea. It's a gestalt. In She, A History of Adventure by H. Rider Haggard, "When I awoke again, it was just dawning, and the garden bearers were moving about like ghosts through the dense morning mists, getting ready for our start. The fire had died quite down, and I rose and stretched myself, shivering in every limb from the damp cold of the dawn. Then I looked at Leo. He was sitting up, holding his hands to his head, and I saw that his face was flushed and his eye bright, and yet yellow round the pupil." So again, we have adjectives and adverbs, the damp and the cold. A good verb in shivering. It tells us that it's a very cold, wet morning, and yet this writer's friend, the narrator's friend, has bright eyes and a flushed face, a face full of color from emotion or something else. And his eyes are bright and yellow. The writer is helping us understand something about this young man. On a very cold morning, a wet cold morning, his eyes are bright and yellow and his face is flushed. If you touched his forehead, how do you think that man's forehead would feel? Hot or cold? Probably you said hot. He has a fever. In fact, on a cold, damp morning, for his face to look like that, he probably has malaria. And indeed, that is true, and that's what you will discover, what you will understand, even without the writer saying malaria or sick or fever. Just from that description, you can probably guess there is something wrong with this young man in the story. And that is a gestalt, and now that's what we'll do in our activity.